I can still feel the exact moment the room fell into silence. It wasn't the kind that follows a heartfelt toast or a magical first dance. No. This silence stung. It hit like a slap in front of 100 witnesses daring me to break. It happened at my brother Ethan Carter's wedding. I had just started to find my breath trying to ground myself when his bride, Madeline Rhodes, took the microphone, and with that icy smile of hers called me a pitiful single mother. The crowd laughed light at first, then louder as if on cue. But that wasn't the sharpest wound. The deepest cut came moments later when my own mother, Margaret Carter, tilted her glass of champagne toward her lips and muttered, just loud enough for the mic to catch. She's like one of those mannequins from a discount store scratched, returned, and left out in the clearance aisle. Laughter exploded again, not polite chuckles, full-bodied, high-pitched laughter, the kind that slices straight through skin and settles like shame around your throat. I sat there completely still. The burn in my cheeks spread, my ears buzzed, and my fingers shook as they reached for my water. I froze before I could lift the glass. My grip was too weak, my composure gone. I curled my hands into tight fists, hiding them in my lap, silently praying no one noticed how fragile I felt. My gaze instinctively sought out Ethan, my baby brother, the one I used to walk home from school and tuck into bed when Dad left. He sat at the head table, eyes lowered to his lap, expression vacant, except for a faint twitch in his jaw. He looked at me, just once. A flicker, then back down again like even meeting my eyes was too much. That flicker, it broke me. I was a child again, standing behind the shed, listening to the neighbor girls whisper about my hand-me-down jeans and messy ponytail. Only this time it wasn't classmates. It was my family, my own blood. And why? Because I was raising my son alone, because I didn't walk in wrapped in designer silk, like Madeline. Madeline now, his wife, stood on that stage, draped in pristine white satin, holding the mic like it was a trophy she didn't need to fight for. Her smile was polished, controlled, and completely devoid of warmth. I'd seen that smile too many times at holidays and birthdays, heard her weaponize compliments that came disguised as flattery. She once told me, "It's honestly amazing you're still standing after everything," like I was a disaster survivor, not a person. Then there was Margaret. The woman who once packed my lunches and told me bedtime stories now looked at me like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out of her life. Why did her words still land like punches? Why did I still care? Was being a single mom all I was in her eyes and theirs? I sat up straighter, back rigid, mouth curled into a practiced, polite smile that ached to maintain. Beside me sat my son Caleb, 9 years old, napkin clenched tightly in his hands. His wide brown eyes scanned my face, looking for clues. I gave him a smile. I had to. I needed him not to see the tears trembling behind my lashes. "Mom," he whispered, "why are they laughing at you?" That question, soft, honest, tore something loose in my chest. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. What was I supposed to say? That sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the first to humiliate you. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to run. To take Caleb's hand, push back my chair, and never look back. But before I could move, Caleb did something I never expected. He stood, just like that, without a glance at me, without hesitation. There was a quiet strength in his posture, something steady, unshaken, that didn't belong to someone his age. And then calmly, he began to walk toward the stage. I should have known that wedding was going to be an uphill climb the moment I opened my eyes that morning. Even before Madeline's sharp little dig. Even before Margaret's cruel quip disguised as casual banter. Before the laughter that split the air like thunder. I had already been carrying the weight of pretending. Pretending I fit in. Pretending I deserved to be there, pretending I was someone this family could be proud of. The act started that morning, standing barefoot in front of my mirror, wrestling with the zipper of a navy blue dress I'd bought on clearance. It was snug in the hips, just a shade too formal for my taste, but it was the only thing I owned that said trying, but not trying too hard. I twisted side to side, checking every angle, tugging at the seams with quiet desperation. "This will do," I whispered to my reflection, not fully believing it. Just then, Caleb pushed open the bedroom door, his curls slightly tousled from sleep, and paused at the threshold. "Mom, you look like a movie star," he said, his eyes round and sincere. That kid, he could break my heart and put it back together in one sentence. I smiled, brushing down his flyaway curls. "Thanks, baby. You're the best hype man I've got." The drive to the venue was quiet, except for Caleb humming some tune under his breath, tapping a rhythm against the window. "Do you think Uncle Ethan's nervous?" he asked, and I laughed softly. "Probably," I said. "Weddings are scary." What I didn't dare say, was that family is scarier. Ethan and I were once inseparable. He's 5 years younger than me, and after our father disappeared into his second life with a second family, it was just the two of us. I helped him with homework, stayed up with him during his night terrors, covered for him when he missed curfew. I used to think I was half sister, half second mother until Madeline came along. Madeline had that kind of presence that made you want to fix your posture. Everything about her was sleek, precise. Her voice, her clothes, even her silences. The first time we met, I tried. I really did. I brought a bottle of wine to their housewarming, complimented her candle arrangements, laughed at her safe little jokes. But it was clear I wasn't her kind of people. At a family dinner last year, she leaned across the table and said, "It's genuinely admirable how you do it all alone in that syrupy tone that stings more than it soothes." It wasn't a compliment. It was a declaration of hierarchy. And Margaret, she fell for Madeline like it was her job. I watched her laugh at Madeline's every story, even the one about returning a blender, like it was high comedy. She never looked at me that way. Her shoulders always tensed when I spoke. Her smile tight, her eyes sharper than they had any right to be. I used to wonder if I was imagining it. That night, I stopped wondering. The venue was breathtaking, white roses cascading down the entry pillars, soft classical music wafting through the air, and candlelight dancing along the rims of gold-trimmed glassware. Everyone looked like they'd been airbrushed into existence. And then there was me smoothing down my dress every time I sat, adjusting the single pair of heels I owned, praying Caleb wouldn't spill punch on his clip-on tie. Still he stood tall in his tiny dress shoes, beaming. "Do I look like a grown-up?" he asked, tugging at his collar. "You look like the man of the evening," I told him, and I meant it. For hours I smiled when I wanted to cry. I nodded along to conversations that left me out. I laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. I survived, right up until Madeline picked up that microphone. And in a blink, all the scaffolding I'd built around myself, my dignity, my years of smiling through judgment, came crashing down. Her words sliced, and the laughter that followed felt like nails in my skin. Then I looked at Caleb, and something in his eyes, something fierce protective, changed everything. He wasn't confused, he wasn't scared, he was angry. And he wasn't about to let them mock his mother while he sat still. Before I could even shift in my chair, he stood, silent, steady, as if he'd already decided this moment was his. I blinked, stunned, my body rooted to the spot as I watched him begin to walk, not rush, not stumble, but walk with purpose toward the stage. At first, I thought he was headed for the cake table, or following the music out of childlike distraction. My breath caught. "Please, baby, sit down," I prayed silently. "Let this moment pass. Let me fade back into my seat, back into invisibility." But he didn't stop. His tiny footsteps tapped across the glossy hardwood, slow and deliberate, like a countdown I didn't know how to stop. Heads began to turn. A few guests leaned sideways in their chairs, whispering, "Is that her kid?" Each word felt like a needle threading straight through my skin. I stood halfway, one hand reaching, my voice tight and panicked. "Caleb," I hissed, "come back here." He didn't even glance back. He climbed the 2 small steps onto the stage where Madeline's bouquet now sat on the table like a prize she hadn't earned. The DJ leaned forward, clearly ready to redirect him. "Hey there, champ. This isn't," he began, but Ethan interrupted. "Let him speak," he said, his voice low but firm, just loud enough to ripple through the room. That quiet command stopped everyone. And there he was, my awkward, Minecraft-obsessed 9-year-old son, standing in front of a microphone, both hands wrapped around the stand like it was his anchor. The roses behind him towered tall, but the way he stood made him look taller, braver. Even Margaret set down her drink. Even Madeline, who had just been laughing at some bridesmaid's comment, turned and froze. And then he spoke. "I know something about the bride," Caleb said, voice calm. Not a tremble, not a single stammer. My heart thundered so loud I could barely register the silence in the room. It wasn't just the quiet you hear when people are curious. It was that brittle, breathless kind of stillness that fills the air right before something breaks. My hands were damp, my mouth so dry it felt like cotton. I could feel my pulse thudding against my throat like it was trying to claw its way out. "Please don't say anything he'll regret," I begged silently. "Please don't let this be the moment that undoes him. Or me." But Caleb's voice, steady, clear, impossibly calm, somehow froze the room even further. Like truth had reached the microphone before anyone could stop it. Madeline's smile twitched. She leaned forward, that signature tilt of her head she used whenever she wanted to pretend concern. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" she asked. Voice syrupy, almost tender, but there was a crack in the porcelain now, a sharpness under the sweetness. Her tone tightened like the laces of a corset, drawn too fast. Caleb ignored her. He glanced toward me just for a second, and in that fleeting moment I saw everything. His confusion, his protectiveness, his quiet fury. But layered underneath there was something stronger, something sacred conviction. Then he turned back to the crowd. I heard her say something, he began, voice unshaken. A gust of breath rippled through the guests like the start of a storm. Shoulders stiffened. Someone audibly gasped. And Madeline's face, just for a split second, shifted. A flicker of alarm, panic, maybe. But she quickly masked it. I couldn't move. My knees felt hollow. The room around me tilted weightless and heavy all at once. What did he hear? I searched my memory, trying to recall every second of the day. Had Caleb been alone with her? And then I remembered earlier that afternoon I had sent him to find the restroom, while I helped adjust Ethan's suit flower. 5 minutes. That's all it took. And now here we were, the entire night dangling by a thread pulled taut by a child's courage. Caleb's voice rang again, a little softer, but it carried. "I was looking for the bathroom," he said, before the wedding started. He looked at me again, longer this time. His face wasn't asking permission. It was telling me, "You always told me the truth mattered. I'm just doing what you taught me." A tear slipped down my cheek, warm and weightless. I wiped it quickly, heart split wide between pride and fear. He turned back to the crowd. "I walked past a room," he said, "and I heard Madeline talking to one of her friends." The room tensed. Madeline's jaw shifted, a slight clench. She opened her mouth like she might interrupt, but didn't. Maybe she knew she couldn't stop it. Maybe she realized what was coming. She said— Caleb paused just long enough for the tension to rise again. She said she didn't really want to marry Uncle Ethan. The impact of that sentence was immediate. Audible gasps. A fork clattered to the floor. A bridesmaid froze wineglass midway to her lips. She said he continued that she needed someone reliable. Someone who'd give her a house and not ask too many questions when she went out late. He took a breath, his voice remained steady. She said Uncle Ethan was too nice, that he wouldn't say no. That's why she picked him. The words hung in the air like smoke in a room with no windows. Dense, inescapable, no one moved. Madeline sat frozen, eyes wide, lips barely parting. "That's not true," she muttered, but it was like shouting into a void. No one moved to support her. No one rushed to deny it. Caleb hesitated. My stomach flipped, and I knew more was coming. I didn't know what, but I could feel it. And he added, his voice almost trembling. Now she said that once they were married, she'd make sure people like my mom didn't show up anymore. That was it. The room didn't gasp this time. It sank. The silence was no longer tense, it was heavy leaden. Like the room itself was ashamed. Caleb turned and looked directly at Madeline, then to Ethan, and finally to everyone else. "She said my mom was embarrassing," he said softly, "but she's not. She's kind, she's brave, she works really hard, and she never says bad stuff about anyone." His voice cracked barely, but it cracked something inside me too. All at once, my composure, my restraint, my pain, all of it shattered into something fierce and proud. I didn't care who whispered. I didn't care what damage it caused. Because in that moment, my 9-year-old did something most adults couldn't. He told the truth, and the entire wedding froze. Like time had pressed pause, like every person in that room had stopped breathing. Madeline's flawless exterior had vanished. She looked pale, unsettled. Her eyes flicked around the room like she was searching for someone, anyone to save her. But there was no one. Not now. Ethan rose slowly like a man who'd been struck and was still trying to regain balance. "Caleb," he said, voice tight. "Come here, bud." Caleb nodded and walked toward him, calm as ever. Ethan bent low, whispered something I couldn't hear, and then pulled him into a long, crushing hug. That's when it hit me. Ethan wasn't mad. He was heartbroken. He stood again, scanning the room, dazed, like he didn't know where he was. Then he turned to Madeline. "You said that," he asked, voice breaking down the middle. She blinked, lips twitching into a smile that was more a grimace. "Ethan, come on. He's just a kid." She laughed too quickly. "You're really going to take his word over mine, your fiancé?" He didn't reply. She tried again, voice rising. "This is crazy. We were just joking around. You know how girls talk before weddings, we vent, we say dumb things." He misunderstood. He's 9. But the air had shifted. People who had been giggling with her earlier were now silent, uncomfortable. Some whispered, others shook their heads. Then from the far side of the room, a voice called out, firm, familiar. I heard her too. Heads turned. It was Rachel Evans, one of Ethan's childhood friends. She drifted away when Madeline arrived in his life, but here she was, standing tall, fists clenched at her sides. I brought her shoes to the bridal suite, Rachel said. She didn't see me standing there, but she said exactly what Caleb just said, word for word. The silence cracked wide open. Madeline's face contorted rage and fear and something else. "Oh my God," she burst out. "You're all turning on me on my wedding night." But she was the only one still speaking. Ethan looked devastated, like the floor had been pulled out from under him and he was still in free fall. "I asked you," he said, his voice raw so many times. He leaned in close, his voice low, barely audible. "I asked you so many times," Madeline. Ethan whispered, his eyes locked on hers. "I asked if you loved me, if you were sure. And every time you looked me in the eye and said yes." Madeline's carefully constructed facade cracked at the edges. Her shoulders softened just slightly as she reached toward him, perhaps instinctively. "Ethan," she began, her voice shaky, fingers stretching for his. But he stepped back, one small decisive step, and that single movement said everything. "I don't know what's real anymore," he said, and his voice trembled in a way I'd never heard before, a man unraveling, thread by thread. "But I know this. My nephew didn't make that up, and my sister, she never deserved what we did to her." His words didn't just reach me, they split something wide open inside me, like lightning striking a dark sea, sudden, fierce, illuminating. For the first time all night, someone really saw me. Madeline didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't plead. She just stood there frozen in place, then turned without a word. Her heels echoed across the marble floor, clicking faster and faster until the sound faded into the distance and then vanished completely. Another hush fell over the room, heavier this time, but different. No longer laced with tension or malice. It was the silence of recognition, of truth settling like dust after a storm. And then a single clap. Soft, steady, then another. And another, until the entire room was applauding, not wild, not showy, but sincere. They weren't clapping for Madeline or even for Ethan. They were clapping for Caleb. For a 9-year-old boy who stood tall in front of a crowd of adults and dared to speak what none of them had the courage to. And I just sat there, my hand over my mouth, tears sliding freely down my cheeks into the linen napkin I hadn't let go of all night. Because somehow, in what should have been the most humiliating moment of my life, my son gave me something back I hadn't realized I'd lost. He gave me my voice. The rest of the evening became a blur. The applause faded into whispers. Guests slowly rose from their seats, drifting toward the bar, collecting their coats, murmuring words they couldn't quite articulate. The fairy tale night had shattered, and in its place something raw and honest hovered in the air. Eventually, Ethan made his way to me. I stood as he approached, unsure of what would happen next. My tears still hadn't stopped, and I didn't try to hide them. He didn't speak at first. He simply wrapped his arms around me and pulled me into a hug, a real one. Strong, long. The kind of hug you give when you finally opened your eyes and seen someone fully, maybe for the first time. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my shoulder. "God, Harper, I'm so sorry." And that's when I finally let go. Just for a second. I held him tightly. Years of distance and unspoken pain pulsed between us like glass that had finally mercifully cracked. I didn't know if we'd ever be the same again, but I knew this, he saw me now. Later that night, Caleb and I sat quietly in the car parked at the edge of the now nearly empty lot. The lights from the venue glowed faintly behind us like the ghost of a celebration that no longer meant what it once did. I looked at him through the rearview mirror. His suit jacket lay folded beside him, his bow tie undone, his curls damp with the effort of a night far too big for someone his age. "You okay, baby?" I asked softly. He nodded, his voice sleepy. "Yeah, are you—" That question struck me harder than anything said at that wedding. "I think I am," I replied slowly, truthfully. "I think I really am." He was quiet for a moment. Then with that sweet clarity children sometimes have, he said, "You're not a discount model. You're the best mommy in the world." More tears, but these didn't sting. They felt warm, healing, like rain falling after a season of too much sun and no shelter. That night, when I tucked Caleb into bed, I held on longer than usual. I kissed his forehead, ran my hand gently through his curls, and whispered, "I'm so proud of you. You were incredibly brave." His eyes were already drifting closed, but he smiled half asleep. "You taught me." And with those 3 words, the world tilted back into place. I used to think being a single mom made me less, like life had stamped me with damaged goods or not enough. But Caleb never saw me that way. And when he stood tall on that stage, and defended me not just as his mom, but as a person worthy of dignity. He reminded me of something I had long buried. I am not weak. I am not broken. I am human. And I have survived more than most. Ethan postponed the honeymoon, said he needed time to think to process. We spoke again a few days later, not out of obligation, but truly talked, and I could feel something between us being rebuilt. Slowly, honestly, not perfectly, but real. Margaret never apologized. A week later, she sent a cold, clipped text. I'm sure you understand things got a little out of hand. Hope you're doing well. I never replied, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need her approval, because I had Caleb, and I had myself. People always say weddings bring families together, but this one, it pulled the masks off. And for that, I'm grateful. Because I didn't lose anything that night. I gained clarity, I gained truth, and I gained the kind of pride no designer dress or perfect photograph could ever offer. Turns out I wasn't the one with the scratch on her label. I was the one who kept her integrity, while others sold theirs at a discount. And the person who reminded me of that, who gave me back my voice and my worth, was a 9-year-old boy in a clip-on tie holding my hand. So yes, that's the story of how my son, my brave, bright, beautiful boy, stood up at a wedding and changed everything with nothing but the truth and a whole lot of heart. If this story moved you, if it stirred something inside you or reminded you of your own strength, please take a second to share it. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if you want more real, raw, honest stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe. Click that little bell so you won't miss what comes next. Thank you for listening.